Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
You got what from Uncle Walter? Eric asked, choking on his beer. I didn't even bother looking up. Whitford House. That set him off. That death trap, he said, half laughing. Sell the land. If it's worth anything, Teresa didn't even try to hide her smirk. Hope you brought a hard hat. I hadn't even finished processing the news myself. The lawyer had just handed me the envelope the day before. One asset in my name. Whitford House, Eastborough, deed included. No mortgage, no taxes due. Just there, like a curse someone wrapped in a bow. At the will reading, my ex's parents, the Shelbys, decided to join the chorus. Margaret Shelby leaned over and muttered loud enough for the whole room to hear. Well, at least the kids will finally see what failure looks like up close. I should have said something. Should have told them all to shut up. Instead, I clenched my jaw and stared at the carpet. My kids, Ben and Lacey, sat beside me. 15 and 10, both way too quiet. I was 37 years old, a substitute math teacher scraping by in a 2-bedroom rental, bouncing between schools in 3 counties. Rent late more often than not. 2 growing kids who needed more than I could give. And now, I had a collapsing mansion that smelled like rot and dust. We drove out to Eastborough that weekend. The moment we pulled up to Whitford House, my daughter asked the question I'd been avoiding. Are we really staying here? I killed the engine, looked up at the place. 3 stories of rotting wood, sagging gutters, vines strangling the porch columns. A demolition notice stapled crooked to the rusted iron gate. Ben scoffed. There's no way this doesn't collapse on us. The porch groaned under our steps. I pushed open the front door. It didn't creak. It shrieked, like the house itself was warning us to turn around. Inside, it was like stepping into a different world, dust thick enough to choke on, cobwebs hanging like curtains. But then I looked closer. Stained glass windows in the foyer caught the morning light, throwing patterns on the cracked tile. The staircase had carved oak railings, worn but still solid. Moldings ran across the ceiling like something out of a cathedral. We walked through the main hall in silence. Even Ben stopped cracking jokes. This place is huge, Lacey whispered, tilting her head to stare up at the ceiling. There was a cold draft slipping down the hall, but I felt something else too. Not just the chill. Something under my skin, like pressure, low and deep, buzzing behind my ears. I brushed my hand along the wall. Paint flaked off. My fingers came away gray with dust. But under it all, I felt it. Real wood. Real history. Looks like we're home, I said. Ben rolled his eyes. Seriously? But I wasn't joking. Not really. I didn't know how long we'd last here. I didn't know if it was even safe. But for the first time in years, it didn't feel like we were surviving someone else's plan. We weren't renting. We weren't just guests. The house was falling apart, sure, but it was ours. Quick note. Before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. And let's continue. I looked over at Lacey, who was already poking around the front parlor with her sketch pad out. Ben stood near the stairs, bouncing his tennis ball off the floorboards. I knew they didn't believe in it yet. Hell, I didn't either. But standing in that dusty, broken hallway, something shifted. It didn't feel like a joke anymore. It felt like a line being drawn. Like maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something that wasn't meant to be easy. I dropped my bag on the floor, wiped my hands on my jeans, and said, "Let's start cleaning." Ben dropped the wrench with a loud clank and sat back on his heels. "This plumbing belongs in a museum," he muttered, wiping his hands on an old dish towel. The sink had coughed up brown water for 5 minutes straight before giving up completely. The pipe under it leaked like it was begging to die. I was elbow deep under the counter, trying to wrap duct tape around a rusted joint, when I heard Ben's voice again, this time louder, more curious. "Dad." This wall's weird. He was standing in the pantry, pushing at a section near the back. The wood there looked darker than the rest, maybe older. The wallpaper was peeling like dead skin, curling up at the edges. I pulled myself up, wiped sweat from my neck, and joined him. "What do you mean, weird?" He knocked on it, then ran his hand over the surface. "It's smooth here. Like someone sanded it clean. And look, these lines." I leaned in. Behind the flaking wallpaper there were grooves in the wood, some shallow, some deep. Lacey came over with her sketch pad tucked under one arm and peeled the rest of the wallpaper back slowly. That's when we saw the carvings. Circles inside circles, some marked like compass points. Strange geometric patterns that reminded me of diagrams from my old trigonometry textbooks. Swirling lines, segments, triangles overlapping. Between them were numbers. Not house numbers or years, but decimals and fractions. And right in the center, carved bigger than anything else, one word in perfect block script letters: begin. Lacey dropped to her knees and started copying the symbols with her pencil. Ben pulled out his phone and started snapping photos from every angle. I crouched beside them, tracing the largest circle with my finger. The edges were sharp, still clean. Someone had taken their time with this. It wasn't some bored teenager with a pocket knife. These lines had purpose. I stepped back and scanned the entire wall. "This isn't random." "No way," Ben said. "It's like coded." We didn't talk much after that. Just worked. Every few minutes, Lacey would pause to shade a detail, then go back to sketching. Ben started peeling more wallpaper, checking if the patterns continued, but it stopped at the panel's edge. A couple hours later, I noticed something new, etched just under the lowest carving, nearly hidden behind a baseboard crack. I pulled out my pocket knife and scraped away the dirt. 5 words emerged, carved in a fine, slanted script. "The journey starts in the past." I froze. That voice in my head, the pressure I'd felt when we walked into the house for the first time, it came rushing back. Not words, not a sound, just a weight. Like something watching, waiting. I hadn't thought about Uncle Walter much in years. We weren't close. But I remembered one night, years ago at a barbecue, when he was half drunk and telling me stories about the Whitfords. "Old Everett never trusted banks," he'd said, nodding solemnly. "Said men who die with secrets die rich." I thought it was just another one of Walter's ramblings. But now, looking at these symbols, these numbers carved behind a pantry wall, I wasn't so sure. By evening we were wiped. The sink was still broken. The trash pile by the back door was almost as tall as Ben, but none of us wanted to leave the pantry. I finally broke the silence. "Let's go to the library." "Now?" Lacey asked, already grabbing her hoodie. "We've got a name. Everett Whitford. And a timeline. If he built this house in the 1800s and hated banks, maybe he hid something." Near midnight, we walked into the Eastboro Library, half covered in dust and still smelling like mildew. The night clerk gave us a look, but didn't ask questions. Probably thought we were some weird homeschool project group. Ben made a beeline for the local history section. Lacey followed him with her sketch pad, flipping to the page with her drawings. I headed to the archives terminal, the old one with the yellowed keys and sticky spacebar. Ben was the one who found it first. "Dad!" he called, waving me over. On the screen was a headline from the Eastboro Ledger, dated October 1929, "Rail Baron Disappears. Ahead of Crash. Local magnate Everett Whitford and family vanished days before stock market collapse. House left abandoned, assets unclaimed." I read the article twice, then a third time. No bodies ever found. No last will processed. No bank account seized. Everett Whitford had simply vanished, along with his wife, his 2 sons, and everything he owned. Ben stared at the screen, eyes wide. What if he buried it? His money, his stocks, everything I didn't answer. But my chest was tight. My mind wouldn't stop spinning. All I could think was, what if he did? What if this wasn't just some creepy old house with creaky floors and ghost stories? What if we were standing on top of a damn fortune? We barely slept that night. I kept replaying the article in my head, those carvings in the pantry. Walter's voice saying, "Men who die with secrets die rich." I wasn't about to jump to conclusions, but I knew one thing. Everett didn't leave all that behind by accident. Next morning, I was in the middle of wrestling a waterlogged cabinet door off its rusted hinges when I heard tires on gravel out front. Not the clunky rattle of a contractor truck or delivery van. This was smoother, slower. I wiped my hands on my jeans and stepped out to the porch. A gray Audi A6 with tinted windows had just pulled up. Clean. Polished. Definitely not local. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out in a dark blazer and sunglasses, despite the overcast sky. Late 30s, maybe early 40s, slicked hair, slim portfolio case in one hand. "You, Mr. Canning?" he asked, walking toward me like we had a meeting. I nodded, crossing my arms. "Depends who's asking." He smiled like we were playing cards and he already knew my hand. "Nathan Pierce, Fairmark Holdings. I represent a group interested in distressed residential properties." He gestured at the house behind me. "This one qualifies." I didn't say anything, just waited. He opened his case, pulled out a folded packet and handed it over. "We'd like to buy the property. As is. No inspections, no delays. 180. Cash. We can close by Friday." I scanned the first page. Legalese, closing terms, escrow service listed. All legit. Before I could answer, Eric's voice came from behind me. "Did he say 180? He asked, stepping out from the hallway with a mouthful of cereal. "Dude, you'd be an idiot not to take that." Teresa followed him out, cradling her coffee like she owned the porch. "Seriously, it's a pile of bricks. Take the money and run." I handed the papers back to Pierce without looking away. "I'm not selling." His smile didn't twitch, but his eyes did, a slight narrowing. "Mind if I ask why?" "You said it yourself. Distressed residential, which means it's more than it looks." He tilted his head. "It's a liability. Structural damage, mold, no heat. You're looking at 6 figures just to keep it standing. Still not selling." Before he could reply, Lacey appeared in the doorway behind me, clutching her sketch pad. "We found something," she said. I turned to her quickly, but it was too late. She stepped forward, flipping the pad open. Behind the pantry wall, symbols, numbers, a word carved in the middle. "Begin." Pierce looked at her, then at me. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes lit up. Not curiosity. Hunger. "Well, that's adorable," he said, smiling with his teeth. "Old men love their secrets. Keeps the memory alive, doesn't it?" Ben walked up beside his sister. "You're not from around here," he said flatly. Pierce ignored him. "Let me offer this. You've got kids. This place isn't safe. You're living in a fire hazard full of fairy tales. Sell now, put your feet up, and let people like me chase ghosts. Everyone wins." I stared him down. "You sure you're not here for the fairy tales?" He shrugged. "Everyone likes a good story. But stories don't pay for lawsuits when this place caves in." He reached into his blazer, pulled out a card and handed it to me. "Offer's good until Friday. After that, the number drops." He turned, walked calmly back to his Audi, and drove off like he already knew I'd call. Eric shook his head. "I can't believe you just turned down 180 cash." I didn't answer him. My stomach was already turning. I walked around back to get some air, past the overgrown hedges and the rusted-out trash barrels. As I got near the service door by the old gardener's shed, I froze. Tire tracks. Not the ones we'd made unloading boxes. These were fresh. Deep ruts through the patch of soft mud near the foundation. The angle was off, like someone had driven up, backed in, then walked around. I scanned the ground. No footprints. But the tracks led right up to the side steps. Right to the door no one had opened since we got here. I didn't say anything to the kids right away. No need to spook them. But something was off. That guy Pierce showed up 24 hours after we pulled historical archives on Everett Whitford? Coincidence? Not a chance. Later that evening, after we'd finished dinner and the kids were back to sketching in the den, I pulled them both aside. "Listen," I said. "From here on out, whatever we find in this house, whatever we think it might be, we don't talk about it outside these walls. Not to your aunt. Not to your mom. No one." "Got it?" Ben nodded. "You think that guy knew about the symbols?" "I think he knew more than he let on. And I think he's not the only one watching this place." Lacey's voice was quiet. "Do you think he's dangerous?" I didn't lie. "I don't know. But I'm not giving him a reason to think we're clueless or careless." Ben folded his arms. "So what now?" I grabbed the flashlight off the table and looked toward the pantry. "Now?" "We stop waiting for someone to tell us what this place is. We go find out for ourselves." The pantry had been bothering Lacey ever since Pierce left. She kept going back to her sketch pad, flipping through the drawings she'd made of the symbols, the carvings, the patterns in the wood. "Something's off," she muttered that morning, kneeling in front of the carved wall while Ben and I hauled debris out of the hallway. "You already copied everything," I said, wiping sawdust off my palms. "What else are you looking for?" She tapped her pencil on the sketch pad. "These circles aren't random. They're space-like rooms. Look," she held the page up, tracing her pencil from one large circle to another. "That's the kitchen. Then the library. This one's the pantry itself. And these..." She pointed to 3 lines connecting those circles, except they didn't match the layout of the house. They cut across angles, between spaces where, as far as we knew, there weren't even doors. "Those aren't hallways," Ben said, leaning in. "They're tunnels. Hidden ones. Hidden passages," Lacey corrected. "That's why the blueprint we found in the attic didn't make sense. Rooms missing. Walls too thick. It's all here, just hidden in plain sight." I crouched next to her, running my fingers over the real carving on the pantry wall while she held up the drawing beside it. She was right. The carvings weren't abstract. They were deliberate. A stylized floor plan. A map. Ben looked up. "So if the pantry's the start, where's the next mark?" Lacey scanned her drawing again. "Library." We grabbed the flashlights and made our way down the hallway. The library had become our default workspace, mostly because it didn't smell like mold and the windows opened fully. I scanned the shelves while Ben checked along the baseboards and behind the curtains. Lacey stopped in front of the fireplace. "There's something carved into the mantel." She crouched, brushing dust off the wood trim above the hearth. We all leaned in. The carvings here were different, more spread out. Star charts, strange constellations, curved lines, number sequences etched into the corners like coordinates. Some were astronomical values. Others looked like trigonometry problems gone wrong. Ben pulled out his phone. "These aren't just symbols. That's a coordinate grid. You sure?" "Yeah, that one's right ascension and declination. Sky mapping." I stared at him. "You get that from your phone?" He rolled his eyes. "From my brain, Dad. I'm not stupid. No one said you were." While Ben decoded the symbols, Lacey started pulling books off the nearby shelf, one by one. I joined her, checking for anything unusual. Damaged spines, misaligned titles, thicker bindings. 15 minutes in, her fingers landed on a red leather-bound volume that didn't have a title at all. "This one's hollow." She handed it to me. I shook it gently. Something shifted inside. The book was sealed shut with a magnetic clasp, barely visible along the seam. I popped it open. Inside was a notebook, bound with twine. Yellowed pages, ink so faded it looked gray. Handwritten notes filled every line, cramped and clean. I flipped to the first page. The title read, E. Whitford, 1927. Everett's personal journal. The next few pages were messy but careful. Notes on the economy. Warnings about instability, predictions of collapse, mentions of the coming ruin and the failure of the banking system. This wasn't paranoia, it was strategy. Then the phrasing shifted, less financial, more cryptic. Preserve what matters most. Let knowledge and rest become the keepers of truth. The true vault lies beneath both. I turned another page. 3 keys to be found, Pantry, library, place of rest. Ben leaned over my shoulder. So we haven't even found the first one yet. Just clues. Looks that way. Lacey sat cross-legged on the floor, reading over the sketch pad again. What's the place of rest? Could be a bedroom, I said. Or a crypt, if this gets really weird. Great, Ben muttered. So we're treasure hunting in a house built by a guy who planned for the end of the world. Pretty much. We spent the rest of the afternoon cataloging what we could. Lacey copied the journal into her sketch pad, word for word. Ben pulled the coordinates into a star mapping app, trying to overlay them onto the house's layout. I made a fresh pot of coffee and tried to figure out what Everett meant by knowledge and rest. By evening, it was obvious. We weren't going anywhere. Our rental lease was up in 4 days, and the apartment didn't have heat. We could have begged Morgan to let the kids stay for a while, but after the stunt Pierce pulled, I wasn't going to hand her any ammo. Not now. I unrolled the sleeping bags in the front room, set up 2 battery lanterns, and started lighting the old fireplace. Lacey wandered in, clutching the sketch pad to her chest. Are we really staying tonight? Yeah, I said. We are. Ben dumped his backpack in the corner, pulled out a charger, and started rigging a power strip to the one working outlet we'd found in the wall. Guess this is base camp now. We'll make it work, I said. The fire crackled behind us. Outside, the wind picked up. It rattled the broken shutters on the second floor and made the whole front wall creak. The house groaned like it was coming alive again after years of silence. We lay there in our sleeping bags, lanterns throwing yellow light across the dusty floor, the journal and sketch pad between us. No beds, no heat. But somehow it didn't feel like we were camping. It felt like we were digging into something real, something buried deep. The wind kept me up most of the night. Wood creaked, pipes rattled, and somewhere near the attic something was shifting, maybe a loose shutter or a trapped bird. I got used to the noises, but the silence between them, that's what made it worse. By morning, we were back in the library, trying to decode Everett's notes again. Lacey redrew the vault diagram. Ben paced with his flashlight, fidgeting like his brain was 5 steps ahead of his feet. I want to check the master bedroom, he said suddenly. Something's off in there. I followed him upstairs while Lacey stayed behind. The hallway floorboards groaned under our steps, and the wallpaper along the staircase looked like melted parchment. In the bedroom, Ben walked straight to the wall opposite the bed and started tapping along the baseboards. Tap, tap, thud. He paused, then tapped again. Right here. The sound was different. Hollow. I knelt beside him. He ran his fingers along the trim until he stopped at a spot where a nail strip jutted slightly out. Check this! He grabbed the claw end of a small pry bar and wedged it under the strip, levering it slowly until the board creaked free with a sharp pop. Dust spilled out first, then a small cloth pouch dropped to the floor like it had been waiting for decades. I picked it up and unwrapped it. Inside was a triangular piece of metal, etched with the same spirals and symbols we'd seen in the pantry, about the size of my palm. It had weight to it. Not gold, not steel. Something in between. 1 down, I said. 2 to go. Ben grinned. Told you. We headed back to the pantry. Lacey had already climbed onto a step stool and was scanning the ceiling beam with Ben's keychain UV light. The cheap plastic thing looked like a toy, but under the purple beam, something faint lit up just above the word begin, a thin arrow pointing toward a capped beam joint. I never saw that before, I said. It only shows under UV, Lacey replied. Same kind of ink we use in escape rooms. She reached up and twisted the painted brass plug embedded in the beam cap. At first it didn't move, but then it clicked sideways with a sharp metallic snap. A small piece of metal dropped from the beam straight into my palm. Same triangle shape, same etched design. 2 pieces now. It wasn't just that they looked similar. They fit. I pressed the edges together, and magnets inside pulled them into place like puzzle pieces locking in. We sat in silence for a second, looking at the joined pieces. Then Ben snapped his fingers. 314. What? From the journal. the coordinate numbers in the library. One of the sequences ended in 314. Pi. And you said, knowledge and rest. This place is the knowledge. We went back to the library and stood in front of the west wall's built-in bookshelf. Ben pointed at the third shelf from the bottom. Third shelf. First book. Fourth row. It's a sequence. Pull them in that order. I reached out and pulled the third book on the shelf. Then Ben took the first from the next shelf up. Lacey stepped in to pull the fourth one down. At first, nothing happened. Then there was a soft click. A hidden catch snapped loose and a narrow slot under the top shelf slid open with a dry scrape. The sound reminded me of a deck plate on a ship being pulled back after years of rust. I reached in carefully and pulled out a third metal piece. Same triangle shape, same weight, same symbols. When we fit all three together, they formed a complete triangle, about the size of a compact disc. A pattern of concentric rings covered the face now. Something told me this wasn't just a decorative piece. It was a key, a literal one. I held it up to the light, turned it over in my hand. We've got all three, I said. Now we need to find where it leads. We spent the rest of the day combing the house for anything that matched the shape. No locks, no indents, no obvious place to insert or align it. Whatever Everett had hidden, he didn't want it found quickly. Near midnight, I stepped onto the front porch to check the camera feed. I'd mounted a single motion-activated camera above the front door 2 days earlier, wired it to an old monitor in the hall. Mostly we caught squirrels and one delivery guy who had the wrong address. But this time, I saw movement. Human. Slow. I rewound the feed. Timestamp, 2:06 a.m. There he was, Nathan Pierce. Black coat, gloves, no flashlight. Just walking the property like he owned it. He moved past the front door, circled around the side, and stopped by the stone foundation beneath the library window. Bent down, studied the rock wall. He wasn't guessing. He knew exactly where to look. I grabbed my phone and called the Eastboro police. The dispatcher was calm, polite. "We can send a car to sweep the area," she said. "But unless he broke in, there's not much we can do. He's trespassing. Technically, he's walking around the outside. No damage, no entry. If it happens again, you might want to install more cameras." I hung up and stared at the paused footage. Ben stood behind me now. He'd come up while I was talking. "He's not giving up," he said quietly. "No," I said. "He's not." Lacey joined us in the hallway. She'd been listening. "What if he breaks in next time?" I turned to both of them. "He's not getting anything," I said. "Not the journal. Not the keys. Not the house. I don't care who he works for." Ben looked at the assembled triangle on the table. "So what's next?" I pointed at the library. "Next, we figure out what this opens, and we move faster than he does, because Pierce wasn't chasing a story. He was chasing ours." We took the triangle key downstairs right after breakfast. No distractions, no phones, no sidetracking. The basement under the library had always felt colder than the rest of the house, like the air didn't want to move down there. I'd chalked it up to bad insulation, but after last night, I wasn't writing anything off anymore. Ben led the way with the flashlight, sweeping across the stone walls like he was waiting for something to jump out. Lacey stayed close behind him, clutching the journal like it was the only thing holding this place together. I held the triangle in my hand. As we moved past the boiler and down toward the back wall, I felt it. A slight vibration. Not constant. Not a hum. It was more like the moment two magnets snap into alignment. A tug. Sharp. Focused. "Here," I said, stopping near a thick seam in the stone, barely visible unless you were looking for it. Ben ran the flashlight along the wall. "That looks like a crack." "Too straight," I said. "Too clean." I pressed the triangle to the seam and rotated it slowly. Nothing happened. Then I pushed harder, and I heard a click. Not a loud one, but tight, mechanical, like something had just slotted into place. "Did you feel that?" I asked. Lacey nodded. "Like it caught something." I twisted again. Another click, and then the wall shifted. A section of stone slid back 2 inches, then sideways into the foundation, revealing a narrow passage, just wide enough for one person at a time. It was pitch black inside. The air smelled dry, not like mold or rot, but like paper and dust that hadn't been touched in generations. I turned to the kids. "Stay close." We stepped through. The tunnel extended maybe 50 feet. The walls were brick, the ceiling low. I could hear our breathing, loud and uneven, bouncing off the close stone. Ben's light hit a steel frame ahead, and then, just like that, we stepped into a round chamber carved into the rock. The space was bigger than I expected, 20, maybe 25 feet across. No lights, no windows, but the beam of the flashlight caught metal shelving, filing cabinets, wood crates stacked 3 high, and glass display cases mounted into the stone itself. We spread out slowly, checking everything. Ben opened one of the display cases. Inside were stock certificates, hundreds of them. Railroad companies, steelworks, oil firms I hadn't even heard of, all from the early 1900s. "These are real," Ben said, wide-eyed. "And old." Lacey flipped open a crate and pulled out a leather ledger, its corners wrapped in brass. She handed it to me. Inside were real estate deeds, plots of land in Illinois, Michigan, Tennessee, signed and notarized by county clerks who'd probably been dead a century. Each was cataloged, labeled, dated. This wasn't just a stash, it was a system. We found 2 more ledgers with similar formatting. One listed bearer bonds, another rare coin holdings. Every entry had a line for appraised value, condition, and storage location. Everett hadn't buried treasure. He'd built a vault that functioned like an archive. On a small desk in the back corner, we found a bundle of letters tied with red thread. I untied them gently, careful not to tear the yellowed paper. The handwriting was clean, formal. The ink had faded in spots, but one message stood out. "If you found this, then you were meant to." I did not trust the banks, but I trusted the system I built. All things of value must be earned, protected, and put to use. Inventory, safeguard, account, then decide it was signed. E. Whitford, October 1929. I handed the letter to Lacey. She read it twice, then tucked it into the journal's back pages. "We have to record all of this," she said. "Every item. Every box." "We will," I said, "but we're not telling anyone until we know exactly what we're sitting on." Ben crouched near a cabinet and found a leather pouch full of coins. He opened it slowly. "Holy crap," he whispered. "These are gold." I stepped closer. Sure enough, minted coins, early 20th century, still shiny. At least a dozen in that bag alone. There was no doubt in my mind anymore. This wasn't just wealth. It was organized, intentional, designed to last. I pulled my phone out to take a few photos and maybe record an inventory video. But just as I opened the camera, I heard it. Footsteps. Not ours. Heavy, deliberate. Coming from the tunnel behind us. I motioned to the kids. "Lights off." Ben clicked his flashlight off instantly. The room went black. I pressed my back against the far wall, pulled the triangle key from my jacket, and held it tight. More footsteps. Closer now. Then a voice, low but clear. "I know you're in here, Pierce." I felt my pulse spike. My fingers tightened around the key. The kids didn't move, not even a breath. He stepped into the chamber with a soft crunch on the dirt floor. I could see his silhouette outlined faintly against the tunnel entrance. He took 2 steps in and stopped. "Well," he said, "you really found it." I didn't answer. Neither did the kids. He walked to the center of the room and turned in a slow circle, as if memorizing the layout. I wasn't sure if he'd spotted us yet, but I wasn't risking a confrontation down here. One wrong move, and things could go sideways fast. There were no cameras, no witnesses, and no easy exits. He finally turned and walked back into the tunnel without another word. We waited 30 seconds, then a minute. I counted his steps as they faded away. When I was sure he was gone, I let out a breath and turned the flashlight back on. Ben looked at me. He followed us. No, I said. He was already watching. He just waited until we made the next move. Lacey hugged the journal to her chest. What do we do now? I looked around the room again. The documents, the storage system, the letter. We do whatever it said, I told her. Inventory. Safeguard account. No more guessing. No more half measures. Because now, it wasn't about curiosity anymore. It was about control. Pierce didn't bother sneaking in the next time. He came through the front door at noon like he owned the place. Clean suit. That same smug look like the answer was already yes. I was in the hallway going over our first batch of inventory notes when he called out. Let's not waste time. You know why I'm here. Ben appeared from the library doorway and Lacey followed right behind, journal tucked under her arm. No one said anything. I motioned for him to follow me down. We went straight to the vault. He stepped inside with no hesitation, like he'd been rehearsing this for months. His eyes swept over the shelves, the filing cabinets, the crates stacked with tags and timestamps. He gave a low whistle and ran his hand across one of the glass cases. You really found it, he said, more impressed than surprised. Wasn't looking for your approval. He laughed softly. No, I suppose not. Then he reached into his blazer and pulled out a thin envelope, held it out like it was a gift. I didn't take it. What is that? My offer. He nodded toward the room. $4 million. You sign over the rights to everything. Contents, property, claim history, all of it. I'll have it filed by tomorrow. You walk away with cash. Clean and legal. Ben looked at me like he'd just been slapped. Lacey didn't move. I didn't even glance at the paper. You think I'd sell this? He shrugged. Everyone's got a number. This isn't about money. That's exactly why you should take it, he said, stepping closer. Because people like you get eaten alive when they try to hold on to things they can't manage. You don't have lawyers. You don't have a firm. You don't even have insurance coverage for this place, do you? You don't know what I have. I know what's coming, he said. Probate challenges. Town zoning board. Quiet title claims from every cousin of Everett Whitford who smells a payout. You'll spend 5 years drowning in legal bills. Then maybe you get a piece of it. But by then, the paper trail's cold, the assets are frozen, and the IRS is parked on your doorstep. I stared him down. So you're betting I fold under pressure. I'm betting you're tired. You've got kids, a failing house, a bank account that probably hasn't seen a comma in a while. Why drag them through this? Before I could answer, Lacey stepped forward. But we solved it, she said. Her voice didn't waver. We followed the clues. We found the journal. That's what matters. Pierce turned to her with a smirk. Sweetheart, the puzzle's just the first part. The real game is proving it matters legally. No judge cares who found the key. They care who has the claim he wasn't wrong. But he wasn't winning either. I crossed my arms. If this is such a done deal, why are you here begging for a signature? I'm not begging, he said flatly. I'm giving you a chance to get out clean. I've already filed my preliminary claim with the county clerk's office. 30 days from now, if no one else submits counterproof, it locks into escrow pending review. Ben stepped up beside me. You're trying to beat us with paperwork. Pierce nodded, like it was obvious. That's how adults play, kid. You've got maybe 2 weeks before the court schedules a hearing. After that, the only thing that'll matter is the paper trail. And you think we don't have one? He raised an eyebrow. Do you? I didn't answer. Not yet. I walked closer, keeping my voice low. You walked around our house in the middle of the night. You trespassed on private property. You accessed a vault you didn't discover, and now you're trying to claim it like it's yours. It was mine the moment Everett's bloodline ended, he said, just loud enough for the kids to hear. He was my great-uncle, in case you haven't figured that out yet. There's no direct heir between him and me. I'm the next in line. That makes you the intruder. Lacey's grip on the journal tightened. Ben clenched his fists. I stepped between them and Pierce. "Let me be real clear," I said. "You can file whatever claims you want, but while you're chasing your paperwork, we'll be in here cataloging every last coin, deed, and certificate. We'll build the case before you even know what we're holding." He looked at me like I was bluffing. "You're not ready for what this takes," he said, voice clipped now. "I've done this before." "You haven't." "Good," I said. "That means you're predictable." He stared at me for a long second. Then he put the envelope back in his coat pocket. "You just made a very expensive mistake," he said. "You call it a mistake. I call it day one." Pierce took one final look around the vault, then walked out without another word. I turned to the kids. "We need to move fast," I said. "We make copies of every document. We pull appraisals. We contact a trust attorney. And we don't talk to anyone else until it's locked down." Ben nodded. "We can do that." Lacey opened the journal again, flipping to the section with Everett's final instructions. "There's more, isn't there?" she asked. This wasn't the end. I looked around the room again, then back at the triangle key still sitting on the desk. "No," I said, "it wasn't. Because if this was just the first vault, the first test, then Pierce had no idea what he was really chasing, and we had no choice but to get there first." Mrs. Klein showed up the next morning, right after breakfast. We were halfway through documenting the vault contents when I heard her knock. Sharp, fast, purposeful. She stepped inside wearing the same navy coat I'd always seen her in at the Eastborough Library, but this time her arms were full. She had 2 large folders, an envelope sealed with red wax, and a thin, hardbound book tucked under one arm. "I kept digging," she said, barely giving me time to say hello. "Didn't sit right with me, the way that man Pierce was poking around last week." Ben popped up from behind one of the cabinets. Lacey put down the inventory log and moved beside me. Mrs. Klein laid everything out on the long dining table we were using as a makeshift desk. Her hand went straight to the envelope. "I found this in our private archives," she said. "It's a copy of Everett Whitford's personal will. Dated 1925, registered but never filed. It was held back, marked pending retrieval upon resolution." I picked it up and scanned the first few lines. My fingers tightened on the page when I saw the key sentence. "The treasure goes to whoever completes the full challenge." Mrs. Klein nodded. "He didn't leave it to a relative. He didn't name a single heir by blood. He left the entire estate to the solver of the full design." That's exact wording. Ben let out a short breath. "So the vault downstairs, that's not the end?" "Not even close," she said. "According to the architectural notes I found, it's just phase 1. She opened the hardbound book. It was filled with Everett's original sketches, not copies, not summaries, the real thing. Diagrams of wall structures, ceiling reinforcements, compartment layouts, notes scribbled in the margins. He'd built Whitford House like a safe with layers. Each chamber, each mechanism, each riddle was another gear in the same machine. "There are more chambers," Mrs. Klein said, flipping to a page with a floor plan that didn't match the current blueprint. "Passages, puzzles, entire spaces hidden from public record. Everett designed the whole estate as a living challenge, but it wasn't just about hiding valuables." She pulled out another document from her folder, a set of banking records, portfolio summaries, custodial ledgers. Everett placed his holdings into custodial accounts, stocks, bonds, real estate contracts, all structured to roll forward through automatic reinvestments. No single bank controlled them. The dividends were rolled over annually and split across successor instruments. Most of it didn't even show up on public filings. Ben leaned over the table, stunned. "You're saying the money's still active?" "Not just active," she said. "It's grown. Quietly, but massively. The holdings matured over nearly a century. Dividends, mergers, real estate trusts, all feeding into the next structure. He didn't bury wealth. He programmed it." I looked down at the ledger again. My stomach tightened. This wasn't some eccentric hoarder stuffing gold coins behind walls. This was a man who'd designed a generational engine and locked it behind puzzles that required someone to actually think, to work, to understand. Mrs. Klein saw my face and softened just a little. "That's why it matters who finishes it," she said, "not just who finds it first." This wasn't meant for a lucky relative or the fastest bidder. She tapped the will again. "It's not about just finding wealth. It's about proving you'll use it the right way," Lacey whispered. "A test." I nodded, my throat dry. "A test of character." Mrs. Klein folded her hands in front of her. "You're halfway through the first sequence. But you're not the only one who knows that now." Pierce filed a competing claim with the Eastborough Recorder's Office late last week. If uncontested, his claim converts to presumptive ownership in 2 weeks. Ben's face went pale. "He's trying to beat us to the finish line by calling it his." "He can't," I said. "Not if the will specifies completion as the qualifier." "He's banking on the assumption that no one finishes it in time," Mrs. Klein said. "And if the court doesn't see proof that the challenge was met, he wins by default." "What kind of proof?" I asked. She opened the last folder, paperwork from Everett's legal counsel, held in library archives because his firm was absorbed in the 1940s. One phrase stood out across the top: "Custodial transfer pending verified completion." "There's a final lock," she said. "Somewhere in the house. One that triggers the release of the trust and proves full execution. Until that's found, the court sees this as an unclaimed estate." I looked at my kids. They didn't need convincing. We weren't backing down now. "We have 2 weeks," I said. Mrs. Klein nodded. "That's your window. After that, Pierce files for default ownership. Then we finish it before he ever gets the chance." She gave a slight smile, like she'd been waiting for me to say that. "I'll help however I can," she said. "Just know this: Everett didn't care who shared his last name. He cared who could carry the weight of what he built. We found the final trigger in the most obvious place we hadn't thought to look, dead center, under the grand staircase chandelier. Ben had been messing with the brass grill above the landing, trying to replace a cracked light cover, when he noticed something strange. A tiny mesh opening behind the decorative trim. Sound meter. Old school tech, but clever as hell. Everett hadn't wanted a fingerprint or a button. He wanted to hear the answer. Lacey stood beside me on the bottom step, journal in hand, and said it out loud. "We're here to preserve. To understand. To use it for more than ourselves." That was the moment the medallion behind the chandelier clicked. Quiet, deliberate, like a clock mechanism unlocking from the inside. A hidden pin dropped from the ceiling frame, and the entire chandelier descended 2 feet, shifting weight into the center of the floor. Then the boards beneath our feet moved. 4 panels slid apart, revealing a spiral staircase leading straight down, wider than the first chamber, deeper into the foundation. Everett hadn't been hiding wealth. He'd been layering it. We stepped down slowly. No dust, no mold. The air was clean. The lights, yes, there were lights, flickered to life with a low hum when we hit the second landing. The chamber was oval-shaped, lined wall to wall with cabinets, fireproof safes, and metal file racks bolted into the concrete. At the center, a steel table held what looked like the master ledger. Bigger, thicker, wrapped in a reinforced sleeve. I pulled it open and my throat went dry. Dozens of portfolios, long-term asset positions, overseas holdings, legacy bonds from rail and oil corporations that had since merged into household names. Most of it still active. We'd brought in a certified appraiser that week, quietly, under NDA. After 2 full days reviewing inventory and scanning the portfolios, he gave us a provisional estimate. The assets, if fully verified, could approach $400 million in current value. He made it clear. The number wasn't just some guess. The portfolio had survived through bearer instruments, layered trusts, and successor holdings, kept alive through dividend reinvestments under standing instructions. It wasn't a vault of money. It was an engine. We also found more letters. One in Everett's handwriting read, "Use this to build, not to hoard." Ben looked at it and said nothing for a long time. That's when we heard the sirens. I went upstairs. Lacey followed close behind. 2 squad cars pulled into the front drive, red and blue lights flashing. A black government-issued sedan rolled in behind them. A court officer stepped out first, dressed in gray, holding a writ with the county seal. He didn't knock. He just walked up the porch like he already knew what was coming. A court officer arrived with a police escort. Pierce had sent them. The officer held up the document. Mr. Nathan Pierce has filed a motion to compel disclosure of the estate under contest. This is a warrant to secure the property and its contents pending judicial review. I stared him down. We've already filed our claim. Not according to the county docket, he said. Do you have supporting materials? I turned to Mrs. Klein, who had pulled up a few minutes earlier, calm as ever. She carried a small metal box labeled 1929, Trust Materials. She handed it to the officer without a word. Inside were the trust papers, sealed and signed, the appraiser's preliminary report, a verified chain of title packet prepared by our attorney and cross-checked against the Whitford ledger. All of it tied directly to the clause in Everett's will, to the solver of the full design. The court officer flipped through the papers slowly. His expression shifted. He turned toward the cruiser and waved the lights down. Then he took out his phone and called the on-call probate judge on speaker. Mrs. Klein didn't wait. She looked right at Pierce, who was just stepping out of his car, already grinning like he'd won. Looks like you just lost, Pierce. He froze mid-step. The officer turned to face him. We have active documentation, full inventory records, and a trust declaration tied to a conditional clause. No grounds for seizure at this time. Pierce's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The officer turned back to me. Until the hearing date, your claim stands. Don't leave town. I nodded. We're not going anywhere. 2 days later, the scaffolding came down. 6 months of nonstop restoration, and the house finally looked like what Everett must have seen in his head when he built it. Strong, clean, lived in. Not perfect, not shiny, but alive. We didn't erase its age. We just let it speak louder. We opened the Whitford Foundation the same day we got the court's final decision. Clear title. Full authority. The estate was ours, and now it had a purpose. Lacey runs weekly art tours through the house. She designed the gallery that covers the second floor, watercolor renderings of the original plans, before and after photos from the restoration, and her own sketches of the vaults, the symbols, the puzzle carvings. People come in quiet, curious, and leave with their heads full and eyes wide. Ben's upstairs most of the time. He's turned the old observatory into a tech hub, security, climate systems, digital archiving. He rewired the entire East Wing himself, then built a 3D model of the house from the original blueprints, layered with what we found. Now we've got a full interactive display in the lobby. And me? I'm still a teacher, but now I get to teach in a place that matters. We turned the West Wing into a public learning center, financial literacy classes, small business mentoring, historical workshops. It's not about plaques and velvet ropes. It's about showing people what's possible when you mix knowledge with action. When you think long. The house is a museum, yeah, but it's also a school, a lab, a quiet rebellion against short-term thinking. Teresa and Eric came to the ribbon cutting. They didn't say much, just wandered the halls like they didn't quite know what to do with themselves. You actually did it, Eric mumbled once, standing in the center of the main foyer. Guess I was wrong. I didn't rub it in. Didn't need to. Even Morgan came by. She stood with me at the base of the staircase, staring up at the chandelier, the one that triggered everything. I thought you were losing it, she said, chasing some fantasy. I shrugged. So did I some days. She looked at me, honest for the first time in years. But you weren't. You were building something. And that's the truth. It wasn't luck. It wasn't just stumbling onto wealth. It was work. Heavy work. Long hours. Doubt. But we stuck through it. We get letters now. Every day. From students who got scholarships through our education fund, From families who stayed in their homes because of the housing grants we created. From veterans who launched businesses in the startup program Ben built. One letter from a donor just said, "You didn't just find treasure. You became it." I keep that one pinned above my desk. Most nights, when the house goes quiet, I find myself sitting by the staircase. Same spot as that first night, 6 months back. Same chandelier overhead. But now there's warmth, lights in every window, footsteps on the floors, life. I used to think wealth meant safety, comfort, owning things. But that was small. Now I know better. I'm not rich the way people think. I still drive the same truck, still wear the same jacket, still eat boxed mac and cheese on Thursdays. But I'm wealthy where it counts. Everett wasn't testing our smarts. That came easy to people like Pierce. Fast talk, sharp suits, smooth contracts. He was testing our heart. What would we do with it? Would we hide it? Cash it in? Waste it? Or would we turn it into something that lasts? In the end, we proved something bigger than bloodlines or bank accounts. We weren't just the right heirs. We were the right family. If you discovered a fortune hidden in your family, would you use it for others? Or keep it for yourself? Let us know in the comments. And if this story spoke to you, hit like and subscribe. It's just one click for you, but it means everything to us.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.